How in the world do I easily walk over 30,000 steps a day? If you've been wondering that same question ever since you landed on the first video of my Acestar Fit channel, this is going to be your chance for you to learn exactly from the beginning of the day until the end of the day how I'm easily racking up 30,000 steps a day. In fact, since July 1st, 2026, I've renewed my 30,000 step plus streak every single day. Prior to that, I had actually brought down my steps to about 25,000 steps. Realistically, I was already hitting over 25,000 steps, but I was nearing the end of my calorie deficit, nearing the end of my cut. I was on a mission to hit 10% body fat, and as a result, I had to cut down on carbs. So less carbs in my diet, less energy. I didn't have enough energy to sustain walking over 32,000 steps a day, which is what my goal was at the beginning of the year. So I had to bring them down. But once I ramped up the carbs, once I added more tropical fruits to my diet, like watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew occasionally, I decided to renew my 30,000 step streak. Now, I'm just about nearing 300 grams of carbs, well over, sometimes over 300 grams of carbs on most days. I had to bring down my protein, but when I felt like I wasn't feeling satiated enough from my meals, I brought back the protein, I added on the meat, so now I'm at over 200 grams of protein and just about 300 grams of carbs. So perfect time to renew and start walking once again over 30,000 steps. But how am I managing that? How do I walk so much every single day without seeing my feet fall off, right? That's what most people say, that it's such a grueling endeavor, that they're diminishing returns after 16,000 steps walked per day. All of that is just some, haterade crap. It's definitely possible, and it's actually very advantageous to walk over 30,000 steps. That's going to be a topic for another video where I break down the exact benefits you get from walking over 30,000 steps. But let me walk you through step by step on how I am able to accomplish this, right? And how I've been able to once again start walking over 30,000 steps since July 1st. This would be, in fact, 11 consecutive days to this point. I wake up pretty early in the morning, and for me, it's a time when people are probably still fast asleep. In fact, I would venture a guess, especially folks in my household, are probably going to sleep at that time. But I usually get up every single morning around 3 a.m., which means that not only do I have an alarm set for the time I get up in the morning, but I also have an alarm set at the time I go to bed at night. So for me to get up at 3 a.m., I need to be going to bed at the latest at 7 p.m. So I'm going to bed at 7 p.m. and I'm getting about 8 hours of sleep. Honestly, sometimes, or most of the time, I'm just up before 3 a.m. My body is accustomed to it. I've been getting up at 3 a.m. for over a year now. Even during the course of my trips overseas last year, I was in a different time zone, and yet I was still getting up at 3 a.m. So get up early at 3 a.m. I break my fast because I'm going to stop eating the day before around 4 p.m., latest 5 p.m. So from 5 p.m. until 3 a.m., I don't eat anything. I don't even take a sip of water, right? After my last meal of the day, which is dinner, I'm going to take my last pint of water. And that's it. It's a complete fast until I wake up the next day. So I'm getting up 3 a.m. I'm going to create my first meal for the day. On lift days like today, for example, that's basically my pre-workout meal. And that's going to be comprised of, plain non-fat Greek yogurt. It's going to have pre-workout, right, with 200 milligrams of caffeine in it, and then some fruit sprinkled on top, like berries, for example. I use a frozen blueberry, raspberry, cherry blend. I'm going to add some watermelons, and I'm going to top that off with some mixed nuts, and I'm going to wolf that down. But I'm not going to do that seated. In fact, I hardly ever sit down during the day. Even when I'm eating my meals 4 times a day, in fact, I'm gonna be walking around my living room. In fact, at the beginning of the year, I was actually in a much better spot in terms of walking while eating. I actually had a treadmill right underneath a standing desk, the Waipu treadmill. Incidentally, the link to that you can find in the description below. But I would essentially just start walking away on that treadmill, right? I would have my laptop in front of me. I would usually be watching like one of my favorite shows, or studying, or doing some work, and just walking away for at least anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. So the first 25 to 30 minutes of the day, I spend eating and walking simultaneously. So that Waipu treadmill isn't working at the moment. So as a result, I went back to basics and started to just walk in circles around my living room. So these days, that's exactly what I'm doing. In fact, since July 1st, I've been walking in circles around my living room, and I'm going to do that for at least 30 minutes. So what am I doing during those 30 minutes? I'm either listening to a podcast, I'm listening to some music, or I'm watching one of my favorite Brazilian Portuguese series. That is going to be something that comes up quite a bit during this video: habit stacking. And that's basically the practice of taking good healthy habits and stacking them around walking. So I'm essentially walking during studying, during work, during eating, just carrying out my normal day-to-day activities. They're spent almost nearly 100% of the time while walking. So first steps of the day are going to come while watching a show in another language, in this case Brazilian Portuguese, for 30 minutes. And I'm going to be checking my MyFitnessPal app, which I have hooked up to the Apple Health app, at periodic intervals to see where I'm at in terms of step count. And as soon as I see I've crossed over 3,000 steps, I'm going to stop. I'm going to kind of rinse out my plate and everything, and then I'm going to get ready for precisely 45 minutes of Portuguese and Spanish practice via Duolingo. So Duolingo gets a lot of crap. People think that it's just like a vocabulary app. It's not very useful. I would actually beg to differ. You'd have to spring for higher subscription tiers within Duolingo. If you go for the free tier, obviously, you're probably limited to a couple of minutes a day of using the app. But if you go with like Super Duolingo, which is what I have, I think I have a monthly subscription, or I might have purchased a yearly subscription, and then that I think is going to set to expire later this year. But anywho, Super Duolingo, you practice not only vocabulary in a language of your choice, but you can also kind of listen to different passages. You can do exercises, a variety of grammatical exercises, and now there's a lot of speaking as well. So there are a lot of speaking pronunciation quizzes that are scattered in each lesson. So I find it useful, at least, and it's also a good way for me not only to continue to learn a new foreign language like Portuguese, but it also allows me to refresh my Spanish knowledge. I previously learned Spanish in my past relationship. I was basically speaking Spanish on a daily basis with my partner, so it was super easy. I didn't really need to spring for Spanish practice, use an app like Duolingo to keep up to date on grammar, punctuation, or pronunciation, I should say, of Spanish. But now, single, living with my 2 dogs, I don't want to fall out of touch. I don't want to forget all the Spanish I learned. So I'm gonna do precisely 2 lessons in Portuguese, and then I'm gonna follow that up with 1 lesson in Spanish. And all the while I'm studying Portuguese, studying Spanish inside of Duolingo, I'm walking around my living room constantly, non-stop. And that's gonna happen for 45 minutes because I get like an XP boost, and that kind of gives me triple the points, sometimes double points. So that lasts for about like 40 to 45 minutes. So now, after doing the first 30 minutes while watching that TV show in Brazilian Portuguese, I do Duolingo practice for another 40 to 45 minutes. So almost every single day, weekdays and weekends, holidays included, I am at 8,000 steps with my first meal of the day and my language practice. So 8,000 steps already. I can now go ahead, take a shower, get dressed, take the doggies outside. Once the doggies are, they take care of their business outside, they eat their breakfast, I'm probably around like 9,000, 9,500 steps. So I'm already at very easily, automatically near 10,000 steps, and it's not even 9 a.m. In fact, it's time for my second meal of the day, which on days that I don't go to the gym, I'm probably just going to wolf down at 7:30, 8 a.m. But if I'm going to the gym, then I'm going to actually save that meal as my post-workout meal, and I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to usually do, and this is 3 days a week, mind you, this is going to be a total body workout, usually lasting for about an hour, where I target all 6 muscle groups. And I generally like to do 2 exercises per muscle group. The only exception is abdominal crunch. I just do that single isolation exercise for my abs, because I'm going to be working on my abs anyway while I'm doing pull-ups, right? Or while I'm doing overhead shoulder presses. That's also going to engage your core. But in general, I'm going to do about 2 machine-based exercises per muscle group. So at the end of the day, I probably end up doing like 12, max 13 exercises. So that's going to take me about an hour. Contrary to what everyone else does at the gym, in between each set, I see people just like sitting down at the machine, just scrolling away on their phone. I don't do that at all. I go into the gym with these AirPods in. I'm listening to music, preferably in another language like Spanish and Portuguese, or a combination of Spanish and Portuguese. And between each set of each exercise, I'm walking around the machine. I am not stationary at any point in the gym. So I'm walking around. I'm probably getting a lot of stares from people thinking that this is one eccentric dude. Between each exercise, instead of resting, he's actually walking. That's my way of resting, essentially. And that's my way of racking up additional steps. So between the time that I walk into the gym and then when I leave the gym about an hour later, I've easily accumulated an additional 2,500 to 3,000 steps. So you can add that to the 9,000, 9,500 steps that I'm going to get after taking my doggies outside. So yeah, let's do that quick math. 9,500 steps plus another 3,000 steps. So I'm easily around 12,500, on occasion around 13,000 steps when I leave the gym. So straight home after that, and I'm going to go ahead and have my post-workout meal. My post-workout meal, I'm going to make sure I have some fast digesting carbs and of course some protein. So that's usually going to be a bowl of oatmeal, right? Old-fashioned oats, 1 serving of it, with 1 serving of whole milk. None of that skim milk, almond milk crap. I'm going to dump some protein powder in it, some whey protein powder, 1 scoop of that. And then of course, as always, gonna top that off with some berries, some watermelon, and if my calories allow me to do so, some mixed nuts. Probably a little less than a serving of mixed nuts. And that is my breakfast or my post-workout meal. And then of course, just like we did for our first meal of the day, I'm going to eat that while I'm walking around. And that Brazilian Portuguese show that I was watching at the start of the day, I probably already watched half an hour of that. So while I'm eating this second meal of the day, I'm going to watch the remaining part of that episode. So probably another 30 minutes. So now I can easily go from about 13,000 steps or 12,500 steps, add on an additional 3,000 steps. So now I'm at near 15,000 or over 15,000 steps, 15,500 steps by the time I've finished that second meal of the day and finished that episode of that Brazilian Portuguese show, that telenovela. So 2 meals down and we're on track for 20,000 steps We're a little shy of that. We're about at 15,500 steps. We're on a good pace. So if it's a work day and I'm working from home, as I usually do for the majority of the week, I'm taking my meetings, my work meetings, while I'm walking around. On occasion, of course, I'm going to have to take my meetings at my standing desk, but I'm not going to be sitting at all. Nope. I'd rather stand to take a meeting than sit down and take a meeting, and that's exactly what I do in most cases. Back when my Waipu walking treadmill or my Waipu treadmill was still fresh and still hadn't suffered a lot of wear and tear, it would barely make any sounds while I was just walking away and doing my meeting. So it was actually very common for me to be racking up 20,000 steps before noon, even 25,000 steps in most cases before lunchtime. But anyway, I'm going to be walking around to take meetings that I don't have to put my camera on for, or I'm going to be working on other stuff like lunch, preparing lunch. And while I'm preparing lunch, which is usually going to be a combination of eggs with salmon, eggs with sardines, with nowadays, because I brought back the complex carbs, right? I swore off the animal-based diet and brought back the complex carbs with the mixed vegetables. So while I'm preparing lunch, I'm also walking around in my kitchen. So I'm trying to get myself to about 17,000 steps, because I know that when I eat my lunch, I'm going to take about 30 minutes. Not only to eat lunch, but then to watch another show in another foreign language. So this is, once again, yet another example of habit stacking. And in my case, it's foreign language learning with walking. So now, more than likely, I'm going to be watching a show in Spanish. And I'm going to be watching that show while I'm walking around and eating my lunch. I'm going to usually probably wolf down my lunch in about 10-15 minutes, and then the remainder, maybe 15-20 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and walk around so that I'm within striking distance, or essentially I'm successful at crossing over 20,000 steps by the end of lunch. Now, if it's a work day and I have other meetings scheduled, I'm going to probably just watch half of that episode, and then it's going to be time for me to give some lunch to my doggies and then take them outside. So at either rate, I'm going to have to give them lunch after I finish eating lunch. So between giving them lunch and taking them outside, that's going to give me another maybe 1,500 steps, max 2,000 steps. So now I'm well over 20,000 steps and probably around 22,000 steps at this point. So if it's a weekday, I'm going to go back, finish up some meetings, maybe send a couple of emails, a couple of Slacks. If it's a weekend like today, one of the reasons why I'm back on YouTube, baby, so I can actually do these walking videos, these walk and talks. And I'm walking around and I'm increasing that step count. My goal between lunchtime and dinner time is to get as close to 25,000 steps as possible. Remember, my goal is to walk over 30,000 steps. So if I want any chance of hitting 30,000 steps before going to bed, I need to hit about 25,000 before dinner. So once it's time for me to start cooking dinner, of course it's going to be probably my most protein heavy meal of the day, because I want to cut down on any cravings in the evening time. So it's going to be chicken breast, it's going to be ground beef, and then once again my complex carbs, the sweet potatoes and the mixed vegetables. That's going to usually take me about like a total of 40 minutes between defrosting the meat and frying it up in the air fryer. And then once that's complete, for the fourth and last time of the day, I'm gonna eat my meal while walking around. And if I have half of that Spanish telenovela to watch, that's exactly when I'm gonna finish that second half of the telenovela. And between dinner time and the end of that telenovela, I am basically able to rack up another 3,000 steps. So I go from about 25,000 or 24,000, worst case scenario, 23,500 steps. I'm able to walk another half an hour while eating and get to about 27,000 steps. Incidentally, it's also going to be dinner time for the doggy, so I'm going to go ahead, take a break from, cleaning up after dinner, and then I'm going to give my doggies their dinner, take them outside around this apartment complex, and that's going to give me, once again, another 1,500 to 2,000 steps. So realistically now I'm going to be around 29,000 steps. The best case scenario, 25,000 steps, or 29,000 rather, after I take my doggies outside and come back. It's still going to be around like 5:30, or maybe even prior to that. And I'm going to just spend the remainder of the steps I need to cross over 30,000, probably listening to a podcast, listening to some music. Probably not going to do any more language learning at that point of the day. That's usually when I start to, wind down. I've been up since 2:33 a.m., right? So that's usually kind of my time to start winding down, getting ready to rest, call it a night. And I'm going to do that while I'm walking around the apartment. So very quickly, I'm able to get over 30,000. And my goal on most days is to cross not just 30,000 and call it a day, but get to about 32,000, because there's always some rounding error present, not only in Apple Health, but also in MyFitnessPal. So if you were to only walk exactly 30,000 steps, or maybe 30,000 in 100, then if you check back the next day with an Apple Health and MyFitnessPal, it's usually going to register that as like less than 29 or less than 30,000, like 29,000 something, because there's always some rounding error. So to make sure to absolutely guarantee that I cross 32,000 steps, that I cross 30,000 steps, I'm going to make it my goal to hit 32,000 at the bare minimum by the time I get ready for bed. So there you have it. That is my full day of walking in a nutshell. I also broke down exactly what I do on lift days. So lift days are going to happen 3 days a week. So that's going to be an actual cheat code to rack up additional steps, because I'm not going to be sitting down between each set. I'm going to actually be walking between each set of each exercise. And just like that, the streak continues. And later today, or perhaps tomorrow, depending on my mood, check back on the community post to see exactly how many steps I walked today and what I ate today and what was my overall calorie and macro breakdown for today. Talk to you all later.